Chapter 7:15 Conclusion. High above in the sky, two figures hovered in silence. Varun and Rule watched from the air as the soldiers below moved through the frozen plain, dragging corpses, securing wounded allies, and extinguishing the last traces of demonic resistance. It was a grim cleanup, but an orderly one. Yet neither man looked at the soldiers for long. Their eyes kept drifting toward the cluster of beasts and monsters standing eerily still in the center of the field. Michael's undead. They did not wander. They did not even react to the movement around them. They simply stood in formation, watching and waiting, a sight that would have terrified most people. Rule swallowed quietly. "They are too strong," he muttered. "How can one boy control so many of such creatures? Just him alone is comparable to the Federation stations in the early floors of Earth." Varun's expression did not change, but the lines of tension around his eyes deepened. "That boy is abnormal." Rule let out a shaky breath. "Abnormal is an understatement, sir." Varun did not respond immediately. His gaze lingered on Michael's legion far below. It was a sight that made even someone like Varun feel a tightness in his chest. Rule glanced sideways at him, noticing the tension. "Sir, what will you report when the higher-ups arrive?" Varun's brow creased. That question had already been gnawing at him. What exactly would he say? Would he tell them that a boy barely in his 20s had solved a case that involved a rank for powerhouse? That this same boy had fought a living elder who had mastered a domain? Would he tell them that the boy had not simply survived? He had ended it. Varun's jaw tightened. "They will not believe me and think something is missing," he said at last, voice low. "They might think I exaggerated or misinterpreted events." Rule hesitated. "But you cannot lie either." "I know," Varun replied. He rubbed the bridge of his nose as if the weight of everything pressed there. In the past, he would not have worried about this. He would have filed his report with absolute honesty, confident that the Federation would act according to principle. That was how he had always lived. That was what he had always believed in. But now, the old man's words echoed in his mind. They do not nurture things they cannot control. They cage them, or they break them. Varun closed his eyes briefly. He did not want to believe the ravings of a man who had fallen so far, who had killed innocents and chosen the path of corruption. Yet hearing those words directed at Michael, seeing the potential of that boy firsthand, had planted a faint shadow of doubt he was not used to feeling. Rule spoke quietly beside him. "You are worried about what they will do with him." It was not a question. Varun opened his eyes again and looked toward Michael's distant figure, which had now appeared walking across the frozen expanse, spear in hand, expression unreadable in the cold wind. Michael looked small from this height, like a lone warrior returning home. But Varun knew the truth. There was nothing small about that boy. He did not know how the boy was able to control close to 100. Rank 3 creatures, but that alone was enough to mark him as a potential threat if nothing was done about those creatures and he maintained a formation like this at any level. At rank 3, racial limits became less important. With access to universal energy through law cultivation, evolution could be steadily advanced, though it would be slower for races with harsh racial limits. If Michael's undead did not stagnate in the future, it meant he could eventually have close to 100 rank 4 undead. That was insanely powerful. "Worried," Varun murmured. "I am thinking," Rule's voice dropped further, "about whether the old man was telling the truth." Varun did not answer immediately. He crossed his arms, staring at Michael with a complicated expression. "That man was evil," Varun said slowly. "But even evil men can speak truth sometimes." Rule frowned. "Sir, you do not truly think the Federation would target him, do you?" Varun let out a slow breath. "I do not want to think so. I want to believe in the Federation I have served my whole life." He paused. "But when a genius like him appears, someone in the higher ranks will notice and ask the same question the old man mentioned," Rule whispered. Varun nodded faintly. "How do we control him? And if we cannot, how do we make sure he does not become a threat A chill that had nothing to do with the ice passed between them. Rule swallowed again, more heavily this time. But sir, the boy saved us. All of us. If not for him, we would all be dead. The whole station. Varun's lips thinned. That is exactly why I feel uneasy, he said. Power that saves can also destroy. It is not the boy I fear. It is the fear others may have of him. For a moment, neither man spoke. Below them, Michael continued walking across the frozen expanse, completely unaware of the storm of thoughts swirling above him. Varun sighed quietly. I will report the truth, he said, but I will choose my words carefully. I will not paint him as a weapon or as a threat. I will describe what he did, nothing more. Rule nodded slowly. That is all we can do. Perhaps, Varun said, eyes following Michael. The higher-ups will see what I see. And what is that? Rule asked. Varun's gaze softened just a fraction. A boy who should be protected, not feared. They both fell silent again. Below, Michael's undead shifted for the first time, turning their heads toward their approaching master. Rule shivered. Sir, what is this youth really? Varun did not look away. Someone the world is not ready for, he said softly. Least of all the Federation. There was one thing Michael always wondered about ever since he started having a group of intelligent undead. Was he going crazy because he was starting to see them as something akin to family? This feeling only grew worse when he began incorporating his blood into their evolution process. Most necromancers did not feel the same way he did. For most of them, undead were numbers. At best, they were better tools. Michael had read many notes on black magic in the academy. One had stated that a good necromancer should be able to sacrifice half his legion without a flicker of emotion if it meant gaining a single strategic advantage. Michael understood that. He even agreed with part of it. Necromancer who could not make hard choices had no business commanding the dead. But somewhere along the way, his path had bent slightly from that cold standard. Maybe it was because his undead were never meant to be simple copies stamped from a single mold. Or maybe it was because, thanks to his blood, they truly felt like kin to him. So when he noticed their attention on him, Michael could not help but smile a little, his body and thoughts feeling lighter. Michael made his way to them, after asking the more intelligent ones about the general state of things. He summoned them all back into the damaged coffin of the forgotten. Just as he finished, he sensed two figures from above making their way toward him. Michael already knew who they were. He had sensed their gazes from the start. The two figures descended in a controlled glide and landed in front of him. Varun stepped forward first. Young man, he called out, voice steady but laced with concern. Are you injured anywhere? Michael shook his head. No, I am fine. Rule exhaled in visible relief, his shoulders dropping. Varun did not relax as easily, but some of the tension in his posture softened. Rule hesitated before asking the question weighing on both their minds. What happened to the old demonic cultivator? Michael kept his expression calm and neutral. Unfortunately, he said, he escaped. Both men froze. The word carried enormous weight for the two men who had personally witnessed the destruction a rank 4 could cause. An enemy like that, alive and lurking in the shadows, was a nightmare. But then Michael continued, voice steady. But he escaped with far greater injuries than before. That single sentence hit them like a burst of warmth in a blizzard. Both men instantly relaxed, just a fraction, but noticeably so. They had seen the old man's state when Michael vanished with him, barely recognizable as a rank 4 powerhouse. Rule rubbed his arms, recalling the blood, the collapsed meridians, the trembling limbs. With those injuries, even if he is alive, he will not be able to move freely for some time, Rule muttered. Varun nodded slowly, though his eyes stayed sharp. And that buys us time. Time they desperately needed. Michael did not correct them. He did not tell them the truth, that the old man was not just crippled. He was sealed, frozen, locked away in a coffin. That was not information anybody needed. Varun inhaled deeply, steadying his thoughts, then placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "You did well," he said. "Too well. If this had gone any other way, we would have lost everyone here." Michael accepted the words quietly. "Come," Varun continued. "The higher-ups will want a report when they arrive. But for now you should rest. We will handle the rest." Michael nodded and followed them back to the second floor of Hell. /N. I think I might start writing longer chapters soon, guys, to provide a better sense of progress instead of sticking to web novel word count. This doesn't translate to a chapter per day too. Chapter 716, A New Face. Edited. They returned to the Federation station in tense silence. Varun did not stop to speak with anyone. He gave short orders as he walked, his authority steady enough to keep the chaos from spilling over. Rule stayed half a step behind him. Michael followed him. They reached the corridor that led to Varun's office. But what the three of them had not expected when they opened the door was that someone was already inside. There were two, actually. One starborn and one human. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. The starborn was the one Michael had rescued. As for why the starborn had not followed them to the first floor, the reason was simple. They had stated firmly that this was not a matter they should concern themselves with. However, everyone at that meeting could tell the starborn was just being a coward and looking for a reason to cover it up. But since this reason itself was not a lie, there was nothing the Aurora humans could do. To be honest, they would not have let the other party enter the first floor even if they had wanted to, as they were too weak to make any difference and their identity as a starborn was special. Then there was the older man. This one looked much older. The older man stood near Varun's desk as if it belonged to him. He was not tall, yet he filled the room. His back was straight, shoulders squared, and his hands rested behind him in a calm clasp that looked practiced. His clothes were plain and dark, but they sat on him with an odd sharpness, as if even fabric was forced into discipline around his frame. His hair was cut short and neat, flecked with gray, and his face carried the kind of severity that did not come from age alone. It came from a life of being used to authority. Michael felt it the moment he stepped in. It was not an aura in the normal sense. There was no raging pressure, no obvious killing intent, no wild energy flaring out to intimidate. In fact, the man looked almost ordinary at first glance. Almost. Then Michael's eyes narrowed. The space around the older man bent slightly. Not enough to warp the room in any visible way, but enough that the air felt subtly wrong, like heat haze without heat. The corner of the desk near him looked a fraction closer than it should have been. The lamp beside Varun's papers seemed to tilt in perspective when Michael focused on it. Even sound felt different, as if the room swallowed noise more quickly near the man's position. Varun stiffened. Rule's hand twitched near his waist before he forced it to stop. They had all felt this recently. That phenomenon. Suppression. A supernatural above rank 3. Michael's fingers tightened slightly, and he was about to summon his spear before calming down. The older man's gaze slid toward them. It was not hostile, but it was not warm either. It was the look of someone measuring a situation in a single breath. Then his eyes paused on Michael. For a brief moment, the air in the room seemed to thicken. Varun stepped forward first, as if instinct demanded he place himself between the stranger and the younger man behind him. "Sir," Varun said, voice controlled, "we did not expect visitors in my office." Though Varun did not know the man, based on the current situation, he could tell that this must be reinforcement from the Federation. The older man gave a faint nod to Varun, acknowledging the boundary without apologizing for crossing it. "I did not come for your comfort, Overseer Varun," he said. His voice was low and even. No wasted words. "I came because this station sent an emergency signal, and from this young starborn here, the situation seems to be more serious than I was briefed on." Everyone's eyes shifted to the starborn. "What do they want from me?" The starborn complained inwardly, keeping his expression steady. "Did they expect me to go against a rank 4? The starborn race held status in countless regions. Even on Aurora, people knew enough to treat them carefully. In some places, A starborn could walk into a hall and have nobles rise without being asked. But status did not turn into immortality. A rank 4 was a rank 4, even in civilizations that looked down on Aurora as young or rough. A powerhouse like that was given respect by default. The only difference was how much respect. And he was not royalty. He was not some famous envoy with a fleet behind his name. He was just a starborn who had been unlucky enough to be trapped in hell. Unfortunately, Michael, Varun, and Rule could not hear any of that. To them, all they saw was the same thing. Rule's eyes narrowed slightly. Varun's expression turned colder by a fraction. Even Michael's calm gaze gained a thin edge. Troublesome, all three of them thought at the same time. The starborn caught the change in their faces and kept smiling. Helplessly, the older man continued without giving the starborn time to explain himself. According to the information I received, he said calmly, the first floor was overrun entirely. Demonic supernaturals in numbers large enough to overwhelm standard defensive formations. The situation of the stationed officers was tagged as critically unstable and possibly nearly wiped out. Varun's jaw tightened. That assessment is correct. The volume of hostile entities exceeded what a second-floor station is expected to handle. The old man went on. Under normal circumstances, your personnel would have been forced to retreat. The old man's gaze shifted, briefly settling on the starborn again. This one reported that you people later went to the first floor again after receiving assistance from an external force, he said. A necromancer, one capable of commanding multiple rank 3 undead simultaneously. His eyes flicked toward Michael for a fraction of a second before returning to Varun. I find that claim difficult to accept at face value, but he did not elaborate further yet, and instead, his tone hardened. Regardless, there is another issue that must be addressed. Varun straightened instinctively. You abandoned standing orders, the old man said. You moved between floors and engaged without authorization from higher command. Varun met his gaze evenly. If we had waited, the situation could have been worse. The older man studied him for a moment. The space around him bent. Just a little more, as if pressure were being applied from all directions at once. That does not change protocol, he said. Deviation, even when successful, still carries consequences. Rule clenched his teeth but said nothing. The starborn's smile stiffened. So, the older man continued, voice even. Once this situation is fully resolved, disciplinary action will be discussed. That includes failure to follow direct command structures before taking independent action. From the words the old man said, it seemed he believed the second-floor soldiers had succeeded but at a great cost. But instead of talking, Varun and Rule seemed to hesitate a bit. Michael observed while deep in thought. Though the old man's words were harsh, if he really thought as they suspected he was thinking, the punishment was normal, but the situation was not even like that. Taking a deep breath and uncomfortable with the atmosphere, Michael spoke. Michael broke the silence. Though they did not ask for orders before moving, he said calmly. I think they deserve a little praise as well, sir. The words landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Varun turned his head slightly, eyes widening a fraction. Rule stiffened. The older man's gaze snapped to Michael. Praise? He repeated, the word sharp. The air around him tightened, the subtle bend in space growing more pronounced. You speak of praise when soldiers disobey orders and rush into a battlefield? His voice rose. Do the lives of the soldiers who were lost not matter to you? The pressure surged. It was not directed, but everyone in the room felt it. Michael did not move. He looked at the old man, eyes steady. No, Michael said. For a split second, the old man's expression flared with anger. Then Michael continued, tone unchanged. No soldiers died. Absolute silence. The bending space snapped back to normal as if whatever force sustained it had faltered. The old man froze. What? He said. Varun straightened sharply. He is telling the truth. Rule swallowed, then nodded. There were injuries, yes, severe ones, but no fatalities among our personnel. The older man stared at them, eyes narrowing, searching for deception. How many? He asked. 0, Varun replied. For the first time since they had entered the room, the old man's composure cracked. His brows drew together in disbelief. That is impossible, he said slowly. The old man's eyes shifted again, this time openly, and settled on Michael. He looked at him properly. The room felt different under that scrutiny. This time there was something new in it. Caution. Chapter 7:17 Questioning 1. When the Federation received the emergency notice from the stations in Hell, they moved immediately. No matter how urgent the situation was, mobilizing rank 3 supernaturals was never easy. To stabilize the situation before it escalated further, they sent one of the few available rank 4 supernaturals they could spare. The man in the suit standing in Varun's office was that individual. When he arrived, he was shocked to find the second-floor station almost empty. It was fortunate, though strange, that he encountered a Starborn there. At the very least, it gave him someone who knew more about what had happened. Most of the information matched the initial report, but new details soon surfaced. Among them was the mention of a young Awakener capable of controlling multiple rank 3 creatures despite supposedly being only a rank 2 Awakener. That detail left a deep impression. Still, the old soldier found it difficult to believe. Perhaps the so-called youth was actually an older man using rejuvenation arts. Or maybe he was already rank 3 and simply wielded an abnormal and dangerous technique. None of his assumptions were pleasant. His concern deepened when he learned that the majority of the second-floor station soldiers had followed that boy's lead. That fact alone made him deeply uneasy. Just as he was preparing to move to the second floor himself, he sensed activity surging from the gate that connected the second floor to the first. He chose to wait. As expected, based on the stable life signs he sensed from the soldiers guarding the gate, the second-floor station had won. It was likely due to that so-called young expert. However, when he finally met the mysterious individual in person, he was confused by the youthful vitality radiating from him. If rank 3 marked a supernatural's first step into touching universal secrets, then rank 4 was an entirely different threshold. It was a step closer to the universe itself. Suppressed or not, there were very few things one could hide from someone at that level, especially when the other party was weaker. Yet Michael was difficult to read. Compared to the man, Michael was fast, but because of everything tied to him, the old man could not perceive him clearly the way he could other rank 3 supernaturals. Michael did not know it yet, but due to his nature, there was nothing he could do to ever appear normal in the eyes of rank 4 beings. Still, while the man could tell Michael was far from ordinary, the fact that he had not yet truly ascended with Alola raised many questions. The biggest of them was the soldiers. How did they survive with 0 casualties? Even he could not replicate such a result under the same conditions. No matter how strong he was still suppressed, and he would have been forced to fight alongside other experienced rank 3 supernaturals. That outcome should not have been possible. The old man's gaze lingered on Michael for several breaths longer than was comfortable. Then he spoke again. "Did you receive any external assistance?" he asked evenly. That must be it. There was no other explanation that fit cleanly. If another rank 4 had intervened even briefly, then everything made sense. 0 casualties. Complete suppression. A clean reversal on the first floor. The old man felt some of the tension drain from his shoulders. But as that thought settled, another rose to replace it. If external help truly existed, then did that mean the early floors of Hell now housed more than one rank 4 supernatural? That was not a small matter. Rank 4 beings were not common assets. The man wondered if this had something to do with the second issue. The Starborn had told him. Just as he was about to pursue the thought further, a calm voice cut in and stopped him cold. "No," Michael said. "There was no external help." The old man blinked. For the first time since entering the room, he hesitated to continue. "What did you say?" he asked. Michael met his gaze without flinching. "The operation was carried out by the second-floor station and my undead alone." Silence fell again. The old man stared at Michael, searching for the slightest trace of exaggeration or deception. He found none. "Impossible," the old man said slowly. Without waiting for Michael to speak, he gestured for Varun to give a full recount of what had happened on the first floor. The more Varun spoke, the more surprised the old man became. It was not only him. The Starborn was equally shaken as he wondered who in the world had saved him. He had seen Michael summon his undead and lead them into the portal, yet the weight of the situation still pressed heavily on his chest. Soon, the room fell into silence as the rank 4 supernatural continued staring at Michael. The silence stretched. The old man's stern posture eased and became gentler, almost familial. He turned fully toward Michael, studying him with an expression that was no longer judgmental but curious. "You," he said slowly. "What is your name, young man?" Michael straightened slightly. "Michael Norman, sir." The old man nodded once, committing it to memory. "And your age?" 18. The old man's brows rose before he could stop them. For a moment, the calm mask slipped, revealing genuine surprise. 18, he repeated quietly. He had sensed the youthfulness in Michael's aura, but he had assumed the boy was in his early 20s at the youngest. That would already have been shocking enough. 18 was different, even among Awakeners who were known to progress faster than ordinary supernaturals. This was absurd. The old man exhaled slowly, recalibrating his thoughts. "And when did you awaken?" he asked. In his mind, the answer could only fall within 2 unreasonable possibilities. 16 years old. 2 years ago. Or 17. 1 year ago. Either would already defy common sense. Michael answered calmly. "This year." Chapter 7:18 Questioning. 2. Edited. In his mind, the answer could only fall within 2 unreasonable possibilities. 16 years old. 2 years ago. Or 17. 1 year ago. Either would already defy common sense. Michael answered calmly. "This year." The words hung in the air. For a heartbeat, no one reacted. Then the Starborn's eyes widened. Thanks to his presence, everyone had been using the universal language almost instinctively from the start, and this was one of those moments. "This year?" he asked shakily, disbelief slipping into his voice. "Are you saying you have only been a supernatural for a year?" Michael nodded. "Half a year." Varun felt his throat go dry. Rule's mind went blank. The old man stared at Michael as if he were looking at something that should not exist. Half a year. Half a year, and he was commanding multiple rank 3 undead, and had even come close to killing a rank 4 powerhouse. When that thought crossed the old man's mind, awe turned into something closer to fear. If that was the case, did this not mean Michael could also kill him? The old man did not speak immediately. The faint warmth that had entered his expression cooled into something heavier and more deliberate. "Do you have a family?" he asked. The room seemed to tighten again, though the pressure was subtler this time. Michael felt it clearly. Still, he answered honestly. "I live with my aunt," Michael said. "I do not have parents." The old man blinked once. First, confusion crossed his face. Then realization followed. This youth did not seem to belong to any clan. Even so, the old man could not understand why he had never heard of someone like Michael. With his current prowess, this was the kind of individual 1 out of every 7 supernaturals would at least know by name. And yet, "Your aunt," the old man said carefully. "She is not affiliated with any supernatural organization?" "No, sir," Michael replied. Silence returned. The old man leaned back slightly, hands clasped behind him again. An ordinary background, no clan support, and he would not have spent more than a few months in any Awakener Academy. 3 months at most. Hardly enough time for structured training to explain what he had witnessed. This was Michael alone. The old man's interest deepened, no longer concealed. This boy had a secret, he thought. Just as he was about to continue speaking, there was a knock at the door. Varun turned sharply. "Enter." The door opened, and a uniformed soldier stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, his eyes swept the room and widened. He stiffened visibly when he noticed who was present. His gaze lingered on the man in the suit for half a second, then slid to Michael. He swallowed. Almost unconsciously, he took a step back. Specifically, away from Michael. The movement did not go unnoticed. Varun's brows drew together. "What is it?" he demanded. "Why are you acting like that?" The soldier flinched at the irritation in Varun's voice. He straightened, snapped a salute, then hesitated again before speaking. "Sir," he said, voice tight, "we just received an urgent report." "From where?" Varun asked. "The lower floors," the soldier replied. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. The soldier continued, forcing the words out. "On the 15th floor, an almost Emperor-class demon has been detected." The Starborn went pale. Varun's hand clenched into a fist. "Repeat that." "An almost Emperor-class demon," the soldier said again. "Confirmed by multiple informants and survivor reports. It is moving upward." "How fast?" the old man asked calmly. The soldier hesitated, then answered. "Rapidly, sir." Far below, deep within hell, a chamber of shattered stone trembled as a fist slammed into the ground. Cracks spread outward like spiderwebs. Jagged debris lifted, then collapsed in a violent cascade. Brian stood at the center of it, chest heaving, eyes burning with barely restrained rage. "Damn it!" he roared, striking the wall again. "That worm, that nobody." The echoes had barely faded when a slow clap sounded from the shadows. Clap, clap, clap. Brian froze. A gray-robed figure leaned casually against a broken pillar, half his face hidden in darkness. "Impressive," the figure said lightly, still throwing tantrums like a child. Brian's eyes snapped toward him. "Say that again." "Oh?" The man tilted his head. "Did I hit a nerve?" He took a step forward, hands clasped behind his back. "You have more than one class, resources poured into you since birth, and yet you still could not deal with a single classmate." Brian's aura flared violently. "Shut up," he growled. The gray figure chuckled. "Touched a nerve after all." His eyes gleamed. "Tell me, Brian, how does it feel to lose to someone with nothing? No backing, no lineage, just raw growth." Brian lunged. He did not even see the movement. The air vanished from his lungs as invisible pressure slammed into his chest. His feet left the ground and he crashed into the wall, coughing violently. The gray figure was suddenly in front of him, fingers pressed lightly against Brian's throat. "Careful," the man said softly. "Though you are the precious son of the Vice Hall Master, that does not mean you can speak to me however you wish." Brian's eyes burned with fury, but he did not move. The man leaned closer, his voice dropping into a whisper filled with mockery. "You are the one with everything, yet you still fall short. Do you know how pathetic that looks? Perhaps if you had managed to send him to a cultivation academy, this entire plan might have been a success. But because of your incompetence in something so minor, he is causing us trouble now." "It's not my fault," Brian muttered. "Still making excuses?" the man replied calmly. Brian clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. The pressure vanished, and he collapsed to one knee, gasping. The gray-robed man straightened and turned away, his tone suddenly bored. "Enough. Your rage is loud, but useless." Chapter 719. Next step 1. If there was one thing demonic supernaturals did above all else, it was disloyalty and lack of unity. They could stand on the same side, but that alone never guaranteed the qualities one would expect from a proper team. Brian looked at the gray figure with rage burning in his eyes, but he soon calmed down, listening absent-mindedly to what the man was saying. A few seconds later, Brian's breath came in ragged pulls as he forced himself to steady his emotions. The gray-robed figure glanced back at him, finally satisfied that the boy was listening. "After years of planning," he said casually, as if recounting a boring story, "we finally succeeded in doing what no single race in hell could accomplish alone. As you know, the man continued, the Aurora group was never alone in its dissatisfaction. Other races felt it too. Minor races, major ones, small and large alike. Many despised the way the realms were being governed. He stepped forward, boots crunching over shattered stone. For the first time in a very long while, they came together as a movement. There were 3 pillars to the plan, the gray figure said, raising a finger. First, we kept the strongest existences in hell occupied. A second finger rose. Second, we stalled long enough for the demon lord of the 30th floor to revive. That alone pushed several of our plans forward. There were many things the demonic supernaturals within Aurora wanted to achieve, but due to their status as Aurora humans, they could not act openly. The reason was simple. Many races would turn against Aurora solely because it was humans taking action. The goal of the demonic faction was never to destroy the realm. It was to control it. That was where the demon lord of the 30th floor came in. If anything went wrong, the blame could easily be placed on the demon lord instead. There were many more layers to it. Then the gray figure raised a third finger. And third, we moved to seize control of the realm gates leading into hell. The gray figure's smile faded slightly. That part, like the second one, he said quietly, was never meant for everyone. It was meant for Aurora and for a handful of other races who chose to follow our lead. Mostly minor races who saw the Aurora group as their banner. He scoffed. And out of all 3 plans, he said, his voice turning sharp, that was the one that failed. Brian's nails dug into his palms again. All that preparation was made useless by a youth who was still wet behind the ears. Michael. The name surfaced like poison in Brian's mind. No matter how many times Brian tried to bury it, it always rose again, uninvited and unwanted, sitting at the center of his thoughts like a thorn that had grown roots. Since the day he was born, Brian had never truly taken anyone as a rival. Not the so-called geniuses. Not the instructors who praised him with complex smiles. Not the peers who tried to measure themselves against him, only to crumble after a single exchange. He had grown up believing the world was arranged in layers, and that he was born above most of them. Then Michael arrived. A boy with nothing. A boy who should have been crushed early and forgotten. Instead, he rose. Fast. Too fast. The word screamed inside Brian's skull, so loud it nearly drowned out the gray figure's voice. Why did it have to be him? He was handsome. Even that annoyed Brian because it was effortless. Michael did not try, and people still looked twice. Girls smiled. Men respected him. Then there was a loving family, or at least something close enough that it still counted in Brian's eyes. Then there was power. Real power. Brian did not understand why all of it was happening to one man, as if Michael were the main character of the world itself. Why did he have all of this? What was the secret? Inside his head, Brian screamed the question again and again until it felt like his skull itself was shaking. Then the truth rose up, simple and ugly, and Brian could no longer avoid it. Jealousy. Yes, Brian admitted it silently, and the admission tasted like ash. He was jealous of Michael. That was why he hated him. Not because Michael had wronged him, but because Michael existed and shone brighter than him every single time by an unbearable margin. And that was also why, deep down, a part of Brian felt a dark, shameful satisfaction at the gray-robed figure's words. The demonic faction had taken notice of Michael. Good. He wondered how long Michael had left to live. Still, despite those thoughts, there were more pressing matters at hand. What do we do now? Brian asked. If the first floor plan failed, then what is left? The gray-robed figure did not answer immediately. He turned his head slowly, as if Brian had just asked something childish, and his eyes gleamed with cold amusement. You are the Vice Hall Master's son, he said. Yet you speak as though you understand nothing. Brian's fingers curled. To be honest, the man continued, his tone lazy but sharp, you are not even worthy to hear the full structure of what the hall prepared. But, he added as if granting mercy, I will enlighten you. He began walking in slow circles. The movement was never of one mind, he said. Most races only shared one thing: resentment, hatred for how the realms are run, hatred for the chains around their throats. So when we moved together only for the parts that benefited everyone. After that, each group chose its own method to bring chaos to its realm. Brian frowned. Meaning, the gray-robed figure replied. The races that did not follow Aurora's banner scattered and pursued their own paths. A faint smile touched his lips. And we, he said, had our own path as well. Brian's eyes narrowed. Through the first floor. Yes, the figure replied. Through the first floor and through the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord? Brian repeated, confused. Wasn't he revived just to cause more chaos? The gray-robed figure looked at him as if he were slow. Of course he causes chaos, he said. That is what he is. His eyes sharpened. But do you really think we would release something we cannot control? Chapter 7:20 Next step. 2. The gray-robed figure looked at him like he was slow. Of course he causes chaos, he said. That is what he is. His eyes sharpened. But do you really think we would release something we cannot control? This was something Brian had been concerned about before. Why would the demonic faction let such a monster loose? He understood part of the reasoning, but it still seemed insane. For a moment, he wondered if the rumors outside were true, if this group was nothing more than a nest of schemes and internal politics. Yet hearing the gray-robed figure speak now, a thought he had never dared to entertain before crept into his mind. Brian's eyes narrowed. You are saying you can control him? The gray-robed figure laughed softly, the sound dry and amused. In a way, he said. Yes, in a way. Brian pressed. An almost emperor-class demon is not something you have control. The man turned his head slightly, glancing back at Brian as if indulging a slow student. The demonic faction was not reckless. They were the type of group that always chose the least dangerous path when one existed. If someone else could bleed first, they would gladly let it happen. If a disaster could be guided instead of confronted, they would guide it. Especially in a place like hell. The suppression on the early floors was not simple. Many believed that a rank for existence, even when suppressed, would still be untouchable, invisible to anything below. That belief was wrong. That was why, instead of using brute force to suppress the Demon Lord after it had served its purpose, it was far better to control it and use it even more effectively. The gray-robed figure turned fully now, facing Brian at last. During the Demon Lord's revival, he said, we did not simply stand aside and watch. Brian's heart thudded. You interfered? We adjusted a few things here and there, the man replied lightly. Brian swallowed. If you are that interested, the man added, turning away again, you should come with me when the time comes. He glanced back over his shoulder, eyes cold and sharp. You might even get to see it. Brian stiffened. See what? The smile returned, slow and cruel. The moment the Demon Lord's role ends, the gray-robed figure said, and the moment the thing that ruined our plans meets its own. His gaze lingered on Brian for a heartbeat longer. Consider it motivation. Meanwhile, inside the Federation station on the second floor, the atmosphere tightened. The report still hung in the air like smoke. An almost emperor-class demon. Only the man in the suit and Michael remained calm. He stood near the window, hands behind his back, gaze lowered in thought. The Starborn cleared his throat. Then, with cautious politeness that still carried an edge of urgency, he spoke. Sir, he said, addressing the old man directly. This should not be an issue with you here, right? The old man turned his head slightly. Why would you assume that? He asked. The Starborn hesitated, then pushed forward anyway. Because it is not truly rank 4 yet, he said. It is only close, and you are a true rank 4. He took a breath, then added, even suppressed, you should still be able to do something, right? Silence followed. Varun's eyes flicked to the man in the suit, waiting. Michael stayed quiet, but he agreed with the Starborn. After defeating a suppressed rank 4 supernatural, he felt confident. On paper, the difference between the two threats seemed clear. The old man did not answer immediately. He watched the Starborn for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice steady. "Let me ask you something," he said calmly. "If two blades are placed before you, and one is said to be superior while the other is not, does that automatically mean the second blade is useless?" The Starborn frowned slightly. "No, sir." "Good," the old man said. "Now tell me this. If the so-called inferior blade is forged differently, balanced differently, and used in a situation the superior one was not designed for, which blade becomes better?" The Starborn hesitated. "The second one." "In that situation." The old man nodded. "Exactly." He turned his gaze back toward the window. "People like to categorize strength too cleanly," he continued. "Rank this, rank that, stronger, weaker, better, worse." His eyes narrowed slightly. "But reality does not work that way." He lifted a finger. "Before ascending to rank 3, a supernatural can already possess a law seed. That seed may even be well developed." He glanced briefly at Michael. "Does that make them rank 3? "No," he answered himself. "Does it mean they are weaker than a rank 3? He shook his head. "Not necessarily." The Starborn listened closely now. "Rank is a threshold," the old man went on. "A definition, not an absolute measure of combat effectiveness in every environment." He paused. "Now let us talk about suppression. Most people assume suppression is simple," he said. "That a higher rank, even when suppressed, will always dominate a lower one." He looked directly at the Starborn. "That assumption is wrong." The room remained silent. "When hell suppresses," the old man said, "it does not care how strong you are in theory. It only cares about what level of power is permitted to exist on that floor." He raised another finger. "So when suppression comes in combat, it is often the rank 3 who suffers more, even if they touch the same ceiling as a rank 4. Someone finally voiced the thought hanging in the air. "So, does that mean that in actual reality, in hell, that demon is probably stronger than you?" The old man shook his head. "No," he said simply. "I am still rank 4. Suppressed or not, my foundation is not something a half-step can surpass." Then his gaze sharpened, and a faint edge entered his voice. "But I do believe it will not be an easy fight." He then turned to Michael. "But perhaps with some possible help, this case might actually be very simple to solve. I wonder what the other races think about this. If I'm not mistaken, some major races like the elves are on the 15th floor, right?" Chapter 7:21 Other Races. Varun spoke immediately after. "Then what should we do now, sir?" he asked directly. "If it is not going to be easy, what is our next move?" The old man turned away from the window and faced them fully. "There is no need for us to act alone," he said. Varun frowned slightly. "Permit me to request enlightenment, sir?" The old man nodded, expression emotionless, and spoke. "Hell does not belong to Aurora," he continued. "There is no reason the responsibility of defending it should fall on one group's shoulders." Varun's eyes narrowed as understanding dawned on him. "You want to hear the other races' positions on the matter?" "Yes," the old man said. "What they know, what they intend to do, and whether this demon's appearance is truly an accident. I do not want to believe it has something to do with the demonic supernaturals, because that would mean their power has reached another level. That would be bad news for everyone, and they would need to be treated with far more caution." Michael remained silent, but his gaze sharpened. He did not have a particularly hostile relationship with the demonic supernatural faction. In fact, he could understand some of their grievances, at least in principle. What he disliked was how they carried out their plans. From Michael's perspective, a war against oppression should be directed at those in control, the masterminds and their enforcers. Collateral damage should be the exception, not the rule. Yet from everything he had seen so far, the demonic supernaturals did not seem to understand that distinction. Instead, those who suffered most were often people who had nothing to do with the conflict at all. Perhaps among the demonic supernaturals there were some who truly fought for a greater cause, justly and sincerely. But the majority did not give off the impression of victims or righteous rebels. They looked more like a group suffering the consequences of their own actions. Even though Michael did not agree with everything they did or believed, he could still understand why, from a broader perspective, the general public viewed any increase in their power as bad news. Varun did not hesitate. "Sir," he said politely, though the tension in his voice betrayed him. "When can we move?" He clearly did not want to sound as if he were rushing his superior, but the urgency slipped through regardless. The old man did not seem bothered in the slightest. "There is no reason to delay," he replied. "We move now." Relief flashed across Varun's face. The old man turned his head toward the Starborn. "You will come with us," he said calmly. The Starborn stiffened, then swallowed. "Me, sir?" "Yes," the old man replied, as if it were obvious. "If I remember correctly, your race maintains a station on the 6th floor of Hell." The Starborn nodded slowly. "That is correct." "Good," the old man said. "That is where I intend to go." Understanding dawned on the Starborn's face. The Starborn race might not excel in direct combat, but they were far from weak. Their value lay elsewhere in information, support, and preparation. In a situation like this, those things mattered. "I understand," the Starborn said after a brief pause. "I believe we will be able to provide whatever support we can." The old man gave a short nod. Michael was taken aback by how quickly the Starborn agreed. No attempt. There was no hesitation, cautious suggestion to remain behind. That alone felt wrong. Deflect responsibility. No. From everything Michael had seen so far, the Starborn were not reckless. If anything, they were careful to the point of timidity. Always calculating. Always weighing risk. So why agree so readily? Michael's gaze shifted to the Starborn. For a moment, he wondered if the Starborn had simply been intimidated by the old man's presence and felt unable to refuse. But the more he thought about it, the less that explanation fit. The Starborn had grown more timid over time, yes, but his response had not been panicked. Was it because traveling to the 6th floor was not an inconvenience, or because he had something there he wanted to handle? Michael narrowed his eyes slightly. Varun straightened. "I will make the arrangements immediately." "There is no need," the old man said. "I will handle the movement." Then his gaze shifted, landing briefly on Michael. "You are coming as well," he added. Michael met his eyes and nodded. "Understood." To be honest, although Michael understood the old man's caution, his recent experiences had left him feeling energized. Part of him believed that with just the two of them, they might be able to resolve the demon issue directly. Still, he was not reckless. One victory was not enough to erase his sense of caution, and he was comfortable with the plan. The old man did not waste time once the decision was made. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve as if they were about to attend a formal meeting, not walk into hell. "Overseer," he said, "from the 2nd to the 6th floor, are there any notable races stationed there?" Varun blinked, then quickly understood what he meant. The old soldier was not asking about minor clans weaker than Aurora. He was referring to races with strength comparable to Aurora's factions, races with enough influence to know what was moving beneath them. Varun straightened at once. "Yes, sir," he replied. "There are. On the 2nd floor, the Amazari," he said. Michael recognized the name immediately. The Amazari were another humanoid race, a variant of humanity as classified by the wider universe. They were often referred to as the Amazon women due to their culture. It was a matriarch-led warrior society. Their original realm was extremely small, perhaps less than a tenth the size of Aurora. Even so, their strength was widely acknowledged and respected. Also on the 2nd floor, Varun continued, this was another race Michael recognized, which made him realize that perhaps he had spent too much time buried in academy libraries. He might need to spend more time outside, even if that meant doing so alongside his undead. "The Stone Kin," Varun said. The Stonekin were a short race with broad, dense bodies. They were often compared to dwarves, though the similarities were mostly superficial. They were classified as a major race, largely due to their age and accumulated influence rather than sheer numbers. Michael continued listening as Varun named the next race, and this time it was one he did not recognize at all. Third floor has the Velari. Fourth floor, the Nightshell race. Fifth floor, the Iron Humans. And on the sixth floor, aside from the Starborn station, there is the Drakeblood race. Michael's attention sharpened at the last name. This one he recognized. Thousands of years ago, a true dragon had descended upon a human, variant world, not to conquer it, not to rule it, but to indulge. The dragon slaughtered every adult male it encountered and took every viable female for itself. What followed was a catastrophe that should have ended in extinction. It did not. Some of the offspring survived. Against all expectations, those children endured the incompatible blood within them. When they matured, they were able to reproduce among themselves. That was how the Drakeblood race was born. Their strength was undeniable. Each Drakeblood carried diluted dragon blood, granting them terrifying physiques, abnormal vitality, and many other benefits. Unfortunately, as generations passed, that blood grew thinner. To preserve their power, they became one of the many races that practiced internal breeding between related bloodlines. In the wider universe, this was not generally frowned upon. Dragons, after all, were creatures that did not recognize bloodlines or kinship when it came to reproduction. The old man's gaze lingered on Varun for a moment. Then we start with the Amazari, he said. Varun straightened immediately. Understood, sir. I will lead the way. There is no need, the old man replied. He lifted a hand and made a small beckoning motion. Get closer. Varun stepped forward at once. You as well, the old man added, glancing at Michael. Michael moved without complaint. The Starborn hesitated for half a heartbeat, then followed, stopping, just close enough that Michael could feel the faint, nervous heat radiating from him. The old man's expression did not change. Point, he said to Varun. Varun blinked. Sir. Toward the direction of their station, the old man clarified, his voice calm and impatient at the same time. Varun swallowed, then raised his arm and pointed toward the far end of the corridor, through layers of reinforced walls, as if his finger could pierce them. The old man nodded once. Then the air around them tightened. Michael felt it like pressure settling over his skin, as if the world itself had decided to squeeze them out. For a split second, the office, the walls, and the window behind them warped, as though seen through water. Then everything went black. No sound, no wind, and then they were gone. Chapter 722 Amazari Race. Edited. If there was one thing Michael envied about rank 3 creatures, it was their spatial abilities. The rest were simply things he naturally desired. Tasks that would have taken him a long time to accomplish by running were completed in a matter of seconds by others. Michael also noticed that this old soldier possessed a far superior spatial ability and range compared to those who had previously transported him using spatial teleportation. He suspected this had something to do with the level of understanding a rank 4 creature possessed compared to a rank 3. After all, these were beings who had already begun forming the prototype of an actual world. Each of them was vastly different from the general supernatural populace. The pressure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. We have arrived, the old man said calmly. Michael's senses snapped outward. They were floating in midair. Below them stretched a vast forest settlement that stood in stark contrast to the barren desert of the second floor. Towering trees with thick, twisting trunks formed a natural canopy, their leaves woven together with platforms, bridges, and elevated halls. Wooden structures spiraled upward along living trunks, reinforced with stone and metal, blending nature and fortification into a single whole. Beyond the forest's edge, the sand resumed its dominance, an endless sea of pale red gold pressing against the greenery like a hostile tide. This is the Amazari domain, Varun said quietly. Michael could already feel it. Not just one or two, but many. The old man glanced downward, then spoke in a low, even tone. "Let us descend," he said. "Hovering above their settlement is an excellent way to be mistaken for intruders." He paused briefly. "And that would make conversation difficult." Varun nodded at once. "Understood." With a subtle shift of intent, the pressure beneath Michael's feet softened. The invisible force holding them aloft guided them downward in a smooth, controlled descent. They did not land on the ground completely, instead floating steadily toward the Amazari settlement. As they drifted closer, Michael's thoughts turned to what he knew of the Amazari. In this race, women were the unquestioned dominant gender. It was not a matter of tradition or belief. It was biology. From the outside, some races mistakenly assumed this structure was cultural favoritism. It was not. A female Amazari was simply stronger. Even when both genders awakened as supernaturals, unless the male held a clear advantage, the female was almost always superior in direct combat. A male Amazari was not useless, but compared to their women, he was frail. As a result, their society had adapted accordingly. The Amazari were a neutral race within the universe. They neither sought conquest nor submitted easily. While they could not match the technological dominance of Aurora or the combined might of the starborn realms and demonic supernaturals, nor rival the ancient supremacy of the elven civilizations, they were far from weak. They were considered an upper-tier race, one that stood above many others and had several races beneath them. That was why they mattered now. Among the races stationed on the second floor of Hell, they were the most likely to provide meaningful support. In a situation like this, another rank 4 or at least a capable high-tier ally would be required. They were barely a few hundred meters from the forest's outer canopy when space rippled. For presences forced their way into existence ahead of them. Through spatial means, the four figures stood between them and the forest. Michael's perception swept over them automatically. Rank 3. All four of them. His senses confirmed it a heartbeat later. They were all women. Their appearances were striking even before one considered their presence. Each of the four stood well over 2 meters tall. Their builds were broad and powerful, shoulders wide, waists narrow, and limbs thick with compact muscle, built in a way that made even trained human soldiers appear narrow by comparison. Their skin tones varied slightly, ranging from deep bronze to warm earthen brown. Their hair was worn practically. One had her hair cut short and close, to the scalp, coarse and dark like blackened iron. Another wore thick braids bound tightly behind her head, each braid reinforced with thin metal rings etched with simple symbols. The third kept her hair tied into a high knot, strands of dark green-black falling loosely around her temples. The last wore hers long but pulled back into a tight tail, the length reaching past her shoulders without interfering with her movements. Their faces were angular and sharp, cheekbones pronounced, jaws strong. None of them could be called soft or delicate by conventional standards, yet there was a harsh, commanding beauty to them. Their eyes were especially notable, with irises that ranged from dark amber to muted gold, reflecting the forest light like a predator's gaze. Their armor caught Michael's attention immediately. At first glance, it looked almost medieval, but the moment Michael's senses brushed against it, he knew it was far stronger than it appeared. Among the four women, the one standing at the front stepped half a pace forward. Her hair was bound tightly behind her head, her eyes sharp and assessing as they swept across the group before lingering on the old man. Then she bowed her head slightly. "I send my greetings. Who may we host, you strangers?" she said. The old man returned the gesture with a shallow nod. "We seek an audience." Her gaze flickered to Michael next. It was hard to read before shifting to the Starborn. Her brow creased briefly, then she looked back at Varun, recognizing the uniform and insignia. "State your purpose," she said. "We come with a matter concerning Hell," Varun replied calmly. "One that may concern all races stationed within it." The Amazari warrior did not answer immediately. Her gaze sharpened, then shifted past Varun, fixing fully on the old man. For a brief moment, the forest seemed to still, as if waiting for her next words. Does this, she asked slowly, have anything to do with the loose demon lord of the 13th floor? The question landed like a hammer. Several of Aurora's people and one of the Starborn inhaled sharply. For an instant, everything clicked into place. It was not that powerful demons did not exist. They did. If they did, not hell itself would have long since collapsed. But seeing one manifest in the early floors was abnormal. Unless it was the 13th. The 13th floor occupied a strange position within Hell's hierarchy. It lay well below the truly shallow layers, yet far above the deep dominions where demon lords ruled entire floors as absolute sovereigns. Everything above the 30th floor was classified as the early floors. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. The 13th floor's lord had been killed countless times throughout history. Whenever it resurrected, guardians from multiple races stationed on that floor would descend upon it almost immediately and erase it again. The balance had held for centuries. So what was different now? They had all assumed something had gone wrong with the guardians. Below, when news of a powerful demon appearing in the early floor spread. But now it seemed the problem originated directly from the 13th floor itself, not from the 20th where the Starborn had first encountered it. Varun's expression tightened. Even the old man's eyes darkened. Slightly. You are aware of this? The old man asked. The Amazari warrior nodded once. We received news recently. After confirming a few records, it was not difficult to connect the dots. Her expression hardened slightly, her gaze shifting from the old man to the forest behind her, as though weighing how much to reveal. There is more, she said. Before news of the demon lord reached us, we uncovered unrest within our own lands. A faction, she continued, her voice steady but cold. One of our more stubborn groups was planning something coordinated that involved forces beyond the second floor. Her eyes narrowed. Fortunately, an elder of our people was able to put a stop to the plan before it could begin. Michael's gaze sharpened. Plans with other groups, other realms. Something about the timing felt wrong. They were not acting alone, the Amazari warrior said calmly. That much is certain, as other races aside from your people and my people have experienced some sort of rebellion in a short time. No one spoke, but the glance the old man gave Varun was sharp enough to draw blood. Sweat beaded at Varun's temple as the realization set in that Aurora's intelligence had been severely misinformed. The fact that they didn't even know what was happening to their neighbors was enough proof. The Amazari warrior exhaled slowly. Given what you have brought to us, she said, and what we have uncovered ourselves, this matter is not something I can handle alone. She straightened. It would be best for you to speak with someone higher. The old man did not hesitate. Then lead the way, he said. Chapter 723 Start a what? Without another word, she turned toward the forest. The other three Amazari warriors moved in a loose escort rather than a guard formation. Michael followed in silence, but the further he went, the more he could feel it. The stairs. They were strange. The Amazari women they passed paused in their work to look in their direction. It was the kind of attention that made Michael feel like he was walking without clothes. He kept his expression neutral, but the urge to adjust his collar or pull his cloak tighter rose anyway. He resisted it. The escorting four did not help. They kept glancing at him too, their eyes shifting to his face, his shoulders, the way he moved, then returning forward as if nothing had happened. Then, after a few more moments of silence, one of the escorting women spoke again. Her tone this time was polite, almost curious. Do you have elven lineage? The question caught Michael off guard. No, he answered honestly. Then, after a brief pause, he added, Why do you ask? The Amazari woman glanced at him again, her eyes tracing his features with open assessment. You resemble them, she said. If one ignores the lack of very long ears, though your mana feels weird. As an Amazon that has an affinity with nature, the only ones who can most times be on par with us are elves. Then Michael noticed it. The old man looked at him. Varun followed suit. Even the Starborn turned his head, studying Michael with renewed attention. After a moment, all three of them gave subtle nods. "I'll take that as a compliment," he said, feeling a bit odd but more curious about elves again. He had seen an elf subject back in the land of origin, but that was the only one he had seen, and he didn't think they looked alike at all. Maybe she meant in terms of appearance level, Michael reasoned. The Amazari woman gave a faint smile. It was meant as one. "Also," she continued, her tone direct, "do you already have a wife?" Michael nearly stumbled. His face remained still, but his cheeks clenched hard enough to make his spine stiffen. He forced himself to answer normally. "No," the Amazari woman hummed. "You look old enough to start looking after a family," she said. Michael's throat went dry. He glanced sideways. The Amazari woman did not seem to be teasing him. She seemed serious. "As handsome as you are," she continued, still walking, "it would be a waste to let you wander around unattached. If you want, there are many suitable women in our clan who could take care of you." Though the Amazari race was largely a neutral civilization, they were one of the many who had internal universal relations due to the number of women in their race. Couldn't be helped. The number of men was few, and even with that, there was no shortage of their women who took in more than one male Amazari into their homes. Michael's jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, he wondered if he had misheard. Unfortunately, he had not. The words were clear. Behind him, the starborn steps faltered for a fraction of a second. Varun coughed once. The old man did nothing at all, not even a change in breathing. They all continued forward as if the question had never been asked. As if the entire conversation was not happening directly beside them. Michael kept his gaze forward and made himself speak again, slow and measured. "I appreciate the offer," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But I am currently occupied with responsibilities." The Amazari woman glanced at him, then gave a short nod. "Responsibilities can be shared," she said. "A good woman takes responsibility for you and makes burdens lighter." The words were not bad to say per se, but they were odd to hear, especially when one knew the meaning behind the words. Based on the common sense of the Amazari race, it would differ significantly from Aurora cultural norms. Michael did not reply. He simply continued walking, and beside him Varun, the Starborn, and the old man maintained their flawless performance. There was not a single sign that they had heard anything at all. Soon, their path widened, giving way to a broad platform grown directly from the trunk of an ancient tree that dwarfed everything around it. At its center stood a massive wooden structure with vines wrapped around the structure in deliberate spirals. Michael could feel several powerful gazes flash past him the moment they drew closer. "This is where our elders convene," the Amazari woman at the front said, slowing to a stop. "Those present here are the ones authorized to discuss matters of significance." She turned slightly, her gaze sweeping over the group. "I will inform them of your arrival and brief them on what you have told us." The old man inclined his head. "That would be appreciated." The Amazari woman nodded once, then stepped forward alone. The wooden doors parted silently at her approach. She passed inside, and the doors closed behind her without a sound. The four men waited patiently as several thoughts flashed through their minds. Michael stood still, hands relaxed at his sides, senses quietly extended to areas a bit away from within the building. He did not know exactly how strong the people in the building were, but he knew what he could and could not do. They were here for nothing important, there no need to do anything that could make the other party uncomfortable or dislike them. After a short while, the doors opened again. The same Amazari woman stepped back out, her expression unchanged but her posture slightly straighter. "They are aware of the situation," she said. "You may enter." She stepped aside and gestured inward. "Please follow me." They stepped inside. The interior of the building was far larger than it appeared from the outside. The walls curved naturally, and the ceiling rose high above them, supported by thick wooden arches that looked more like living ribs than pillars. Light filtered in from above through narrow openings in the bark, casting a warm amber glow across the hall. There were quite a few people already seated in the building. They were seated in a wide circular arrangement, each Amazari woman occupying a raised platform that seemed to have grown seamlessly from the floor. None of them wore armor. Instead, they were dressed in layered fabrics and hardened leather. Michael's perception swept over them carefully. Rank 3. All of them, and not the shallow kind. These were seasoned rank 3s, their foundations deep and stable, their auras dense and refined. Each one radiated strength earned through long years. However, among all of them, none of them were comparable to the old man beside him. There was no pressure that bent space or any other phenomena. Their power was formidable, but it remained contained within the limits of rank 3. The old man stood apart even here. At the far end of the hall sat one figure slightly elevated above the others. Her presence was heavier than the rest, though still unmistakably rank 3. The Amazari woman who had escorted them stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Honored elders," she said, her voice clear. "These are the representatives from Aurora and allied realms. They bring urgent information regarding hell." A brief silence followed. Then the silver-haired elder spoke. "You may speak, sir," she said as she sat straight and said it with a bow, as a sign of respect to the old man's power while gesturing for them to give him a chair. The old man nodded his head slightly and sat down as the other rank 3s in the space straightened too. Michael remained silent, standing half a step behind. "This matter concerns more than one race," the old man said evenly. His eyes shifted briefly to his side. "For clarity, I will allow the young Starborn to speak first. He is the one who directly witnessed the initial incident." He turned his head slightly. "Young Starborn." The Starborn stiffened at being addressed, then stepped forward without hesitation. He straightened his posture and bowed respectfully toward the elders. "My name is Caliph," he said. "I serve at our station on the 20th floor of Hell." The elders' attention sharpened as they listened to the Starborn's account. When he finished, the old man spoke again. "If I am not mistaken," he said, "the Demon Lord is not the only abnormality." His eyes swept across the circle of Amazari elders, and without blinking, he continued. "According to my sources, multiple races have experienced internal discord within a short span of time. Given the timing of the Demon Lord's appearance, this feels less like coincidence and more like a coordinated set of actions." He paused briefly. "However, uncovering the instigators behind that unrest is not our immediate priority," the old man said calmly. "What matters now is addressing the Demon Lord that is advancing toward the higher floors of hell." His gaze settled on the elders. "That is why I have come here, to hear your assessment and to ask what assistance the Amazari can provide." Chapter 724 Allies 1. "Your Excellency," the silver-haired elder said. The title was deliberate. It acknowledged not only his status as a representative of a realm capable of producing someone of his level, but also his standing as a rank for existence. Around the hall, several of the other elders mirrored the gesture in silence. "You speak the truth." Her gaze swept across the circle before returning to him. "We have reached the same conclusion," she continued. "This is not a matter that concerns a single race unless that race is prepared to bear a potentially crippling loss." This was the truth. In the early levels of hell, there were multiple races that could afford to send a rank 4 or several peak rank 3s to confront the Demon Lord. However, as long as the battle did not take place in the deeper floors, any fight to the death would result in severe losses. The higher one stood at rank 4, the more suppression they faced. This fact was often misunderstood. Suppression did not mean weakness. It meant compression. If rank 3 spanned levels 1 through 5, and rank 4 spanned 6 through 10, then any rank 4 entering the early floors would be forcibly pressed down to the upper limit of rank 3. Even so, their foundation would still make them stronger than a true peak rank 3. They would effectively operate at a strength between 5.1 and 5.5. Then there were half-step rank 4s, beings who stood between 5.7 and 5.9. As long as the universe had not acknowledged their breakthrough, even if they could display abilities resembling rank 4 capabilities, they would not be suppressed. Reaching such a state was rare. Most rank 3s progressed cleanly from 5 to 6 if their growth was stable. Half-step beings were often geniuses with extreme compression of the higher realm who, for various reasons, could not ascend yet. In other cases, their prior foundation was so strong that they could exert greater power while remaining at a lower rank. This was why none of the knowledgeable elders found it strange that a rank 4 had come to them seeking assistance. The demon lord of the 13th floor is no longer what it was in its previous incarnations, the elder said. It has crossed a threshold. At that level, she continued calmly, even a peak rank 3 is insufficient. She glanced briefly toward the old man. Only those who stand at rank 4, or those directly supported by such beings, can confront it without courting annihilation. I assume that is why you came here. You intend to participate, correct? Yes, the old man said simply. I will be joining. Then we will join as well, the silver-haired elder replied without hesitation. Her words were immediately echoed. If your excellency is willing to step onto the field, the Amazari will not remain observers. Her expression softened slightly. Unfortunately, she continued, there is a limit to what we can provide. Her gaze sharpened. We have no immediate means of contacting a rank 4 from our side. Vern's brow creased faintly. The elder noticed at once. Such beings are rarely idle, she explained, and even if one were present within hell, the chances of them being close enough to contact in time are slim. She exhaled slowly. With your excellency participating, and with our combined support, we believe the demon lord can be halted before it reaches the higher floors. She paused. But we must act quickly. Her eyes swept the room. If it ascends further, we may be forced to temporarily withdraw from hell and abandon our foundations. The old man listened in silence. Outwardly, his expression remained calm. Inwardly, he rolled his eyes. He saw through it immediately. None of what was said was false, but it was polished. Everyone here wanted the demon lord gone, but no one wanted to be the one paying the full price. He could not blame them. Still, he had no intention of fighting a risky, thankless battle on behalf of multiple races while they watched from a safe distance and later praised his sacrifice, assuming they even praised it at all. There was also the risk that an enemy of the Federation would take advantage of the situation to strike him down. He was not afraid of the demon lord. That had never been the issue. What he wanted was assurance. The old man leaned back slightly in his chair and spoke again. Very well, he said evenly. Then tell me this. His gaze settled on the silver-haired elder. What exactly will the Amazari contribute? The elder met his eyes without hesitation. Myself, she said. For a brief moment, even the other elders turned to look at her. The old man blinked once. Alone? He asked. The elder laughed. She rose slowly from her seat. Up close, the years showed in her silver hair and the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. Yet the moment she stood, her presence changed. Her aura did not expand explosively. Instead, it grew dense, grounded, and heavy, like an ancient tree driving its roots deeper into the earth. She flexed one hand casually. I may be an old woman, she said with a smile, but I can still punch, like a young girl. A few of the Amazari elders allowed themselves faint smiles. Michael felt it then. This old woman was at the absolute peak of rank 3. The old man studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. That is acceptable, he said. The silver-haired elder inclined her head in return. Good. Then we are agreed. Then one of the other Amazari elders spoke, her voice firm but respectful. Elder, take care of yourself. Another added quietly, return safely. The silver-haired elder smiled faintly. I have survived worse places than hell, she said. And worse, enemies. Her gaze shifted to the old man. Thank you, Your Excellency, she said sincerely. Several of the elders inclined their heads in agreement. The old man rose from his seat, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. There is no need for thanks, he said calmly. We are all trying to avoid a disaster. He turned slightly, already preparing to leave. "We should move now," he continued. "There are other races to speak with, and time is not on our side." At that, the silver-haired elder's smile deepened, a sharp glint flashing briefly in her eyes. "Lead the way, Your Excellency," she said. Chapter 725 Allies 2. Edited. With the old man's spatial abilities, they moved on to the next race stationed on the second floor. The Stonekin. Unlike the Amazari, the Stonekin did not live above ground. Their domain lay beneath the desert itself, hidden far below the shifting sands of the second floor. What appeared barren and lifeless on the surface concealed an enormous subterranean civilization carved directly into bedrock. The Stonekin were short, barely half the height of an average human, but their bodies were dense and compact, formed of stone-fused flesh that gave them a weight and solidity far beyond their size. Their society was structured and rigid, built around craftsmanship. Unlike the Amazari, leadership among the Stonekin was not determined by gender, but by merit, age, and power. The meeting was brief but decisive. Though they did not have any internal conflict, they needed no convincing. After deliberation, they committed 2 rank 3 elders to the effort. With their agreement secured, the group departed the second floor. The old man's spatial authority folded space once more, carrying them upward toward the boundary between floors. The third floor marked a shift in atmosphere. Where the second floor alternated between desert and forest, the third was dominated by a vast sea, floating landmasses, and endless wind currents. It was a world made entirely of islands. It was here that the Veari made their home. The Veari were a winged race, tall and slender, with pale skin and feathered wings. Michael mentally classified them as a variant of angels, if one ignored their eagle-like faces. The Veari were harder to negotiate with. After a polite but firm refusal, they declined to provide assistance. From there, the group ascended once more. The fourth floor was encased in perpetual twilight, its terrain covered in slightly muddy sands. This was the territory of the Nightshell race. Unlike the other races, the Nightshell had experienced direct losses from internal sabotage. With new information and external support now available, they did not hesitate to join. Their rank 3s were not overtly powerful, but they added to the group's collective strength. The next destination lay on the 5th floor, the Iron Humans. At first glance, the 5th floor looked almost normal. Like the other floors, there was no sun. Instead, a dim, diffuse light filled the sky evenly, neither bright nor dark, yet nothing was truly obscured. It created a false sense of normalcy. Michael found it unsettling. This was a floor that looked peaceful enough to make one forget where it existed. Soon, they reached Iron Human territory. The Iron Humans were human in shape, but not in appearance. Their skin carried a muted gray tone, ranging from pale ash to dark steel, as if iron dust had permanently fused into their flesh. Their bodies were heavier than those of normal humans. On the 5th floor, their cities were carved directly into the mountains. Massive gate structures guarded every major approach. Watchtowers lined the ridges, each manned at all times by sentries clad in heavy armor. Beneath the extraordinary exterior, their civilization was strangely familiar. Michael recognized it almost immediately. Their governance, logistics, and social hierarchy mirrored Aurora's in many ways. The difference lay in their era. One was modern, the other medieval. Power among the Iron Humans was tightly concentrated, but this was not Michael's concern at the moment. It was knowledge for later. The Iron race had also suffered. Internal unrest had shaken their foundations more violently than they admitted publicly, which made their agreement swift. The next transition carried them to the 6th floor. This floor was divided cleanly down the middle. Not gradually, not symbolically, literally. Half of the world was bathed in perpetual day, while the other half was locked in eternal night. A sharp, visible boundary ran across the land like a scar, separating light from darkness with unnatural precision. The sky on the day side glowed with a pale, steady brilliance. The night side was the opposite. A deep, ember-tinted darkness hung overhead, and the ground there was dark, scorched and warm, radiating heat even through heavy boots. Michael instinctively slowed his steps. Beside him, the Starborn adjusted his pace as well, unconsciously, falling into stride. Out of everyone present, the Starborn was the only one Michael felt even vaguely comfortable around. They were not the same, but they were close enough to share an unspoken understanding. As they advanced, the Starborn quietly explained the nature of the sixth floor. The dayside, despite its brightness, was cold. Mana there was abundant, pure, and unusually stable. The night side, ironically, was hot. Two races ruled this floor. The Starborn occupied the night side. The Drakeblood ruled the day. As two of the strongest races in the universe, they could afford this dominance. In Hell, this type of setting was not rare. The sixth floor was classified as a special floor. Floors in Hell were sometimes termed special if they possessed additional traits that demanded attention. Not all special floors were obvious at first glance. The sixth floor was special for reasons that went far beyond its dramatic division. Special floors in Hell were not defined by appearance alone. They were defined by function. The sixth floor was one such place. The cold, illuminated half of the world was saturated with mana to a degree rarely seen in the early floors. This was not chaotic mana, nor was it aggressive. It was dense, calm, and remarkably stable. This abundance of mana also gave rise to unique resources. The other half of the floor was its inverse. The night side was hot, but not in a destructive way. The heat was constant, deep, and penetrating. It did not burn the skin outright. Instead, it seeped into muscle, bone, and blood, stimulating the body. At a fundamental level, this side of the floor was rich in a different kind of energy. Prolonged exposure strengthened muscle fibers, increased bone density, and enhanced bodily resilience. Cultivators who trained physical techniques here found their progress accelerated, especially those focused on raw strength, endurance, or bloodlines. Chapter 726 Brutal Universe. Unfortunately, out of the 100 floors of Hell, the sixth floor was still only the sixth. That single fact placed an unspoken limit on its value. The effects of the sixth floor were undeniable, but they were not absolute. They worked exceptionally well on the weak, the growing, and the unrefined. For those still shaping their foundations, the environment was a treasure. Progress that might have taken years elsewhere could be compressed into months here. But for the truly powerful, the difference was subtle. To them, the special energy of the sixth floor was little more than unusually flavored air. The mana on the dayside, while abundant and pure, lacked the depth needed to meaningfully affect high-rank existences too. This limitation was precisely why the sixth floor was not contested by greater powers. Hell contained other regions with higher mana density. There were zones where mana was not only purer, but layered with fragments of higher laws. There were places where physical refinement energy was violent, dangerous, and vastly more effective, though survival there required power to match. Compared to those locations, the sixth floor was valuable but not irreplaceable. This reality explained why only two races ruled it. The Starborn and the Drakeblood had paid a price to secure the floor, but not one high enough to attract interference from deeper powers. Strong enough to dominate the sixth floor, yet not so tempting that others would want to seize it. The Old Man and the gathered rank 3 allies chose to visit the Drakeblood region first. They did not travel on foot. From the moment they stepped into the sixth floor, everyone chose the air. Aside from the night and day abnormalities, the sixth floor looked normal as well, with plant life and so on. However, the lack of surprise for new things Michael had expected after seeing so many strange floors ended up coming. It was when the first wall appeared. A wall that stretched for kilometers. Watch structures sat at regular distances along the ridge, each one shaped like a jagged tooth. Michael's eyes narrowed. This was not a post. It was not even a fortress. It looked like the outer boundary of a city. He had not expected that. In his mind, Hell was a place people passed through, not a place to live. Even races that held floors usually maintained stations and strongholds, not full settlements. Their people came, trained, gathered resources, rotated out, and returned to their home realms. That was what made sense. That was what Michael had assumed. Yet below him lay a civilization. A real one. Michael felt something else too. Population. A few 100,000? There were moving dots along the streets and platforms. There were clusters of buildings that looked like they were built for daily life, rather than war. Michael hurriedly turned to look at Caliph, the Starborn, for explanation. Caliph did not look surprised at all. He glanced down at the city in passing, as if it were a familiar landmark rather than something abnormal, then looked back ahead, while keeping pace in the air. "Why are you surprised?" he asked. "A top race can sustain a large population anywhere it decides to, as long as it is willing to pay the cost." Michael held his expression steady, but his eyes stayed on the structures below. When Caliph put it like that, it sounded obvious. Michael's mind shifted. He considered Aurora's scale. If a civilization like Aurora chose to anchor itself in hell, the hardest part would not be building a city. Caliph spoke again, seemingly having anticipated Michael's next thought. "And yes," he continued, "you are probably wondering why other races do not do the same, even when they could." Michael did not answer, but the silence was enough. Caliph explained without slowing. For most races, building a permanent civilian settlement in hell was impractical. Hell was not a stable territory in the way normal realms were stable. A single change in a neighboring floor's balance could ripple outward and turn a safe region into a killing zone. Stations were flexible. Cities were not. A station could be abandoned in hours. A city could not. Evacuating tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands required time, and much more. If a crisis rose suddenly, the slowest people would die first, and they would die in numbers that would stain a race's reputation for centuries. There was also the question of purpose. Most races used hell like a resource field and a training ground. They rotated warriors through it, gathered rare materials, and left. The danger was acceptable because the people involved were combatants. If the worst happened, losses were painful but contained. There were also the deeper reasons that only powerful races truly understood. Hell did not like permanence. The longer a settlement existed, the more attention it drew from the things that crawled in hidden places. Demons were not mindless. Beasts, and even in the 6th floor, though not in intimidating numbers, there existed other rank 3 demons. Putting aside the rank 3, rank 2 in large numbers was enough to cause damage. Michael asked why the Drake blood were different. Caliph did not answer immediately. He simply told Michael to look. Again, Michael frowned, then forced himself to focus on the movement. Below rather than the walls and towers. Then the details settled. Most of the figures below were not Drake blood. He had never met a Drake blood before, but he knew enough. Drake blood looked very human except for the fact that they had horns and a few other minor features. The people below didn't and seemed to belong to entirely different races. But wasn't this the Drake blood territory? Why was there a large number of other figures? Caliph did not bother to soften it. "That is why a city can exist here," he said. "Because most of the people down there are not Drake blood." Michael kept his gaze on the streets, still trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what he believed hell should be. Caliph continued in the same calm tone. "The Drake blood can do it because this is not their population." Michael's brow twitched. "Then whose is it?" Caliph's voice lowered a fraction. "Vassals. The Drake blood property." Michael's stomach tightened. Caliph did not look down at the city this time. In the wider universe, a vassal race is not always conquered by slaughter, he explained. Sometimes it is conquered by contract, sometimes by debt, sometimes by protection. His gaze flicked to Michael. "And sometimes it is conquered because a stronger race decides you are useful." Michael's eyes returned to the streets. The figures below were too diverse to be one people. Too many horn shapes, too many skin tones, too many physiques. A cluster of short, wide-shouldered beings moved past a group of lean, long-limbed ones. A line of carts was pulled by creatures that looked like domesticated beasts guided by humanoids that could have passed for humans if not for the ridges along their brows and the faint scales at their necks. Michael's jaw tightened. Slaves. Caliph did not correct him. He only said, "The word changes depending on who is speaking." Michael exhaled slowly through his nose. Caliph gestured faintly with his chin toward the horizon. "In hell, technology is less reliable," he said. "Not impossible, but limited. The environment disrupts many systems. Transportation channels are unstable. The deeper you go, the worse it becomes." He paused. "So physical labor matters." Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. Caliph continued, "The sixth floor has resources. Most races take the steady route of having combatants do the work themselves, either for training or whatever. The Drakeblood, on the other hand, chose efficiency and low cost." Michael already knew where this was going. He looked down now, and his expression barely changed. "According to our sources and the blueprint other races use, they call it opportunity for their vassals." Michael's eyes hardened. Caliph's voice did not. "The vassals are told they are climbing," he said. "That serving their rulers is a ladder. Work hard and your children will gain better status. And for some of them, it is even true." Caliph spoke again. "Most of the people you are seeing are not the original conquered ones," he said. "They are their children." Michael's chest rose, then fell. He sighed, deep and tired, even though none of this had been done to him. The universe really was brutal. Caliph did not respond to the emotion. He only finished the thought he had begun earlier. "This is why other races do not do this," he said. "Not because they cannot build a city." His eyes sharpened slightly. "Because if you cannot hold it forever, then you are building a grave." He looked forward. "And if you can hold it forever, then you must decide what you are willing to become to keep it running. Most races don't care. If it's not their race, some don't care, and some even go so far as to say if it's not from our race, it is of another. Mind, this is the universe. It is also why every race strives for hegemony and the ability to remain on top. *n. Please vote to support and comment about the pace. I don't know if it's being too slow or could use a bit of speed. Thank you for reading. Chapter 727 Hunt for a Demon Lord 1. With multiple rank 3 supernaturals flying close by, even if the overseers of the territory wanted to ignore it, they could not. What surprised the visitors, however, was the welcome they received. Who dares to fly above the territory of the Drakebloods? The sky above the dayside darkened instantly. The pale brilliance that had filled the heavens was swallowed as if a veil had been torn away. Then came a roar, followed by a vast, rolling force that crushed downward, rippling through the air. Michael felt it pass through his chest and spine, vibrating bone and blood in the same instant. Something enormous tore through the cloud layer. A drake. His body was vast. Black and blue scales overlapped like armor. Its wings stretched wide, blotting out entire sections of the dark sky as they beat once, hard enough to send shockwaves spiraling outward. Michael was shocked. What sort of welcome was this? No demand for identification before going all out? Then the attack came immediately. The drake's jaws opened, and a torrent of lightning erupted forward as a dense, spiraling beam that warped the air around it. The sky screamed as the attack carved through space itself, aimed directly at the cluster of floating figures. The attack crossed the distance in an instant. Lightning compressed to the point of distortion screamed through the air, its core so dense that space bent around it. For the first time since entering the 6th floor, the old man finally showed his hand. He raised one hand. First, nothing visible happened. Then the space in front of the group rippled, as if the sky itself had inhaled sharply. That was when Michael felt it. The atmosphere in front of the old man condensed violently, layers upon layers of compressed air folding inward like invisible walls stacked atop one another. Wind screamed as it was dragged into place, density skyrocketing in a heartbeat. The lightning beam struck and stopped. It slammed into the invisible barrier and flattened, the lightning forced to spread sideways as if it had collided with an immovable surface. Michael's eyes widened. Was it the power of the strike that would have sent him to the ground in tatters, or the casual display of power the old man used? The gap between their levels felt enormous, making Michael clench his fist subconsciously. This level of power looked distant to him, yet it was actually achievable if he chose to settle. He shook his head almost immediately. Thanks to his recent experiences in hell, a trace of insecurity had crept into his heart, throwing off his usual composure. Rather than ascend with just any law, it would be better to do so with one comparable to his undead. Otherwise, it would be embarrassing, especially if his advantage only amounted to making fire hotter. Perhaps it was because of the old man's display of power, but the drake in the sky did not attack again. Behind the old man, the allies who had activated their laws to defend themselves stiffened. They knew he was strong, but seeing it was still impressive. Once they recovered, they all turned toward the drake with visible anger. The old man lowered his hand slowly, the compressed air dispersing as if it had never existed. His gaze lifted to the drake hovering in the darkened sky. "Is that how the drake blood welcome guests now?" he asked calmly. The drake snorted. The sound was deep and resonant, unmistakably feminine, carrying the weight of something ancient and proud. Lightning crawled lazily along the edges of her scales as her massive head tilted downward. "Do guests normally fly over their host's head?" she replied. Her voice rolled like distant thunder. "Or do they think themselves so important that courtesy no longer applies?" Her slit pupils narrowed. "Old man," she continued, lips curling back just enough to reveal rows of sharp teeth. "Do not mistake one blocked strike for fear. I am not scared of you." She had clearly realized that the old man was a suppressed rank 4. Though she remained arrogant on the surface, she was tense inside and had already begun sending out mental messages. As a peak rank 3 and a Drakeblood, there were very few things in the early floors of hell that could threaten her. That fact had fueled her pride. Now regret was beginning to creep in. With the power of her race behind her, she was not afraid of a rank 4. But if that rank 4 did not care about the consequences to her race, she could die. The old man smiled faintly. It was not warm. "It has been years," he said evenly, "since I have met an arrogant junior who speaks so freely in front of me." The drake laughed. "Junior?" she scoffed. "Just because you aged in the void does not make you older than me. When one entered the realm of understanding the world, their spatial abilities grew, especially anything related to space. Because of that, while not perfectly accurate, perceptive supernaturals could roughly sense how deeply another had remained. In the void, where time had no fixed meaning. Behind the old man, several of the rank 3 allies bristled. A few allowed their auras to leak, pressure pressing outward like coiled steel. Finally released. The old man did not react. His gaze slid away from the drake as if she were no longer worth his tension. He looked at the empty air beside her, at a spot where there was nothing. "If you're here," he said, "stop lurking." For half a breath, nothing changed. Then the void wrinkled. A tall woman appeared in midair. Black robe. Long horns that curved back like polished obsidian. A thin tail that swayed behind her, slow and deliberate. Her skin was pale with a faint ash tint, and her eyes were the kind of dark that did not reflect light. The rank 3s reacted instantly. /N. Please vote to support and comment. Refresh next chapter to clear possible errors in case of delay, and see you with more chapters tomorrow. Thanks for reading. Chapter 728 Hunt for a Demon Lord 2. Edited. Why is it that when it's my turn to do something, something always goes wrong? Michael lamented as he stared at the sky, where 2 figures stood on empty air. One was the old man from the Federation. The other was from the Drakeblood race. The shocking part was that both of them were rank 4. That alone left Michael confused. Ever since entering Hell, or rather, ever since entering the Academy as a whole, rank 4s no longer seemed as rare as he had once believed. Hell only intensified that feeling. Even within the Academy, he had encountered only a handful of rank 4s, and even then those encounters were either extremely brief or from a great distance. He had never been involved in matters at their level before. Yet now, not only had he killed one, he had remained close to another for nearly an hour. At the moment, the entire group waited outside Drakeblood territory, patiently allowing the discussion above to conclude. The Drake from earlier had already left the moment the rank 4 from her side appeared. The Starborn drifted a little closer to Michael. "Do you think they'll reach an agreement?" he asked. Michael watched the two figures in the sky, the pressure between them folding the air into subtle waves. He did not answer. Immediately, "I don't know," he said eventually. "But if they do, then with just those two alone, the Demon Lord problem should already be resolved." The Starborn glanced at him, then nodded slowly. "I was thinking the same," he said as he assessed the gathered rank 3s and the two rank 4s above them. "Even without any more support, this is already excessive." Michael agreed, though he did not voice it. In truth, he had believed from the start that just himself and the old man would be enough. Still, at this stage, he did not want unnecessary losses. He had no intention of losing any undead, and caution against the unexpected had pushed him to accept more people joining. What he wanted more than anything now was for the Demon Lord to be dealt with quickly, so he could return to exploring Hell properly. Aside from this place, he could not think of anywhere else that could provide such a large and diverse supply of cores. The only alternative would be the corrupted dimensional cracks the Academy controlled, but that involved far more time, paperwork, and regulations. Hell was simply more appealing. The pressure in the sky shifted. A moment later, the old man descended, every gaze fixed on him. He did not keep them waiting long. "The discussion is over," he said. His tone was even almost casual. "There will be no joint operation. The Drakeblood rank 4 is here by invitation from her people," he continued. "They requested her presence specifically to deal with the Demon Lord. That alone was enough to stir unease. She does not intend to cooperate," he said. "She plans to handle it herself." Several of the rank 3s stiffened. More than one of them clearly wanted to comment on the arrogance of that decision, but none did. The reason was obvious. Several of the rank 3s stiffened. More than one of them clearly wanted to comment on the arrogance of that decision, but none did. The reason was obvious. No matter how irritating it was, no one present could ignore reality. She was not beneath them. The old man's gaze swept over the group once. "I suspected something like this might happen," he said. "I just wasn't certain." He paused briefly. "Rank 4s are not cabbages," he added. "But now it seems very likely she isn't the only one. More rank 4s may already be on their way. That is good news for us," he continued. "Whether she cooperates or not, the Demon Lord is still being addressed." His gaze lifted briefly in the direction the Drakeblood rank 4 had vanished toward. "I still plan to head there," he said, "even if no one else comes. With just her and me, the odds are already more than sufficient. Anything beyond that is excess." Several of the rank 3s exchanged glances. No one spoke. The old man turned his attention back to them. "So now I'll ask plainly," he said. "Do you wish to continue following me, or will you return to your territories?" Silence stretched for a heartbeat. The Starborn was the first to move. "I'll return," he said with a hint of embarrassment. The others might not have known, but Michael was already fully aware of his cautious nature, even if it was supported by reasonable and legitimate excuses. The Starborn inclined his head slightly toward the old man. "With rank 4s involved, my presence won't change the outcome," he said. "Staying would only add unnecessary risk." The old man nodded once. "That's a sensible choice," he said. The Starborn glanced at Michael briefly, then stepped back, already preparing to depart. One by one, the others began to consider their own positions. Michael watched them quietly. By the time the decision finished rippling through the group, the change was stark. More than a dozen figures had arrived with the old man. Now only a handful remained. One after another, the rank 3s chose caution. Some bowed briefly before departing. Others offered quiet words of respect and withdrew without ceremony. None of them lingered. With rank 4s stepping onto the board, they understood their limits. The sky slowly emptied. In the end, the crowd thinned until only a small core was left. The old man remained. Michael stayed. So did the silver-haired Amazari elder. The 2 Stonekin elders remained as well. That was all. From more than a dozen supernaturals, only this group remained. The old man glanced around once, taking stock of those still present. There was no surprise on his face. "This is enough," he said. His voice carried no bravado, only certainty. Michael felt it too. With the old man, himself, the Amazari elder, and the 2 Stonekin, the group was small, but it was solid. Chapter 729 Demons. Thank you for reading and the continued support. Asterisk. Though he did not have the chance to check the territories of the Starborn and the Drakeblood, and felt it was a pity, Michael looked forward far more to seeing the Demon Lord. What kind of creature could inspire such caution from a rank 4 powerhouse, even while suppressed? Using mortal terms, an adult would not normally fear facing a child, even if that child was sick with malaria. Yet in this case, it felt as though the illness was severe enough that even a grown man might lose. Aside from wanting to witness the creature and its power, Michael was also quite interested in its corpse. He was not certain whether he could turn a rank 4 into an undead, but he felt he had a good chance with something that was still at rank 3. Yes, it was strong, but it had not yet crossed the line where even ambitious necromancers would give up entirely. That said, the chances of this happening were slim. Surely the corpse of a demon lord could not be useless, but with so many eyes on it, this was not the time for Michael to reveal his desire to claim it. Still, though it felt somewhat unfortunate, he was not overly bothered. He believed that given time, his talent, and a sufficient pool of resources, any of his undead could reach that level at the same stage and eventually surpass it. With their course decided, the old man did not waste time. Space folded. The world lurched. As they passed through several floors on the way to the 15th floor, they learned more about the Demon Lord situation. Although the Federation did not have stations on the lower floors like they did on the 1st and 2nd floors, they still maintained controlled locations on other floors. The old man simply did not know all of them. Fortunately, with others present, they were not lacking in current information. In the next instant, the scenery changed completely. According to what they learned, the Demon Lord had not remained on the 15th floor for long. It had appeared suddenly, unleashed a brief but violent wave of chaos across several floors, then vanished just as quickly. Yet that short appearance had been enough to announce its presence to numerous races across the early floors of Hell. After that, nothing followed. Only silence, which raised a single lingering question for the group. Where was the Demon Lord now? The old man gathered the limited information they had and reached a simple conclusion. If the Demon Lord had last been seen on the 15th floor, then the fastest way to narrow its location was to speak with those who ruled. There were 3 major races that held territory on this floor. One of them was the Elves. As they flew over the vast wilderness of the 15th floor, Michael finally understood why this place was compared to an Amazon plain. He found the name strange, yet oddly fitting when considered more deeply. Endless forests stretched as far as the eye could see. Towering trees pierced the clouds, their canopies forming layered seas of green. Massive vines coiled around ancient trunks, and rivers cut through the land like silver veins. Life was everywhere. Too much of it. Michael glanced down at the forest below, then looked at the old man. "We should go to the elves," he said. The response was immediate. No. It did not come from one voice. It came from all of them. The silver-haired Amazari elder shook her head slowly. "Elves are not pleasant to deal with," she said. One of the Stonekin elders spoke next. "I would rather not explain why we should avoid them." The second Stonekin rumbled in agreement. Michael frowned slightly. He knew elves had a mixed reputation across the universe, but this reaction hardly looked balanced. Michael clicked his tongue quietly. "So who do we visit first?" he asked. "One of the other 2, the old man said. The group adjusted their direction in the air. Michael cast one last look at the endless forest stretching beneath them. It was a pity, but he pushed the thought aside. Right now, the demon lord mattered more. They were just about to leave when a distant eruption of mana entered their senses. Michael's eyes narrowed. He felt it from an absurd distance. That alone said enough. Whatever had erupted was so far away that sensing it at all meant it was anything but normal. The two Stonekin elders stiffened. The silver-haired Amazari elder's expression shifted slightly. The old man did not ask questions. He vanished instantly, without any gesture to gather them. One moment he was there. The next, the air where he stood was empty, as if he had never existed. The three rank threes froze for half a breath. They stared at the empty space he had left behind. Then they looked at each other. The Amazari elder disappeared next. One of the Stonekin elders vanished right after her. The other followed a heartbeat later. And then only Michael remained, floating above the endless canopy. For a moment, there was nothing but wind and the distant echo of the eruption. Michael clicked his tongue. He did not have a law, so he could not fold space or step through the void like they had. But he could still fly. Michael inhaled once. Mana surged through his body. The air around him compressed, then detonated. Boom! A sonic boom tore outward behind him as he shot forward like a spear. The trees below blurred into a continuous green smear. Cloud layers ripped past him. Wind screamed in his ears until it became a constant roar. Michael's eyes narrowed further. He pushed again. Boom! Another thunderclap rolled across the sky. His speed climbed. Chapter 730 Demons 2. The 15th floor's heavy, life-rich atmosphere resisted him like thick water, but his body did not slow. His muscles tightened, his bones hummed with pressure, and his mana moved with frightening efficiency. Michael's gaze locked onto the direction the others had vanished toward. He could not see them, but he could feel the faint traces left behind. Most people would have fallen behind immediately. Michael did not. He reached the first point where one of the Stonekin elders had disappeared. He passed it. His eyes widened a fraction. He had expected to feel the gap widen with every second. Instead, the distance did not seem to explode the way it should have. Michael clicked his tongue again. This was his first time fully testing his flying speed, and indeed, his body was definitely not an ordinary vessel. Ridiculous, he muttered. Then he pushed harder. Boom! The sound rolled across the sky like a cannon. Michael accelerated until the air ahead of him began to distort, and the pressure around his body turned into a tight shell, a moving barrier that split wind and cloud. His coat snapped violently behind him. His hair whipped back. Below, entire rivers became thin silver lines. It was a brute method. It was inefficient compared to stepping through space. But it worked. And the most absurd part was that, for a brief stretch, it felt like he was keeping up. Not perfectly, but enough that the gap did not become hopeless. The moment Michael broke the sound barrier ahead, the silver-haired Amazari elder felt it first. Her brows knit together. She turned her head slightly, senses extending backward, and what she felt made her breath catch. Something was coming. Fast. Behind her, one of the Stonekin elders slowed for half a second. He frowned. The second Stonekin noticed it an instant later. His heavy brow lowered as his perception sharpened, following the disturbance. Backward along its path. Both of them reached the same conclusion at nearly the same time. That rank 2 was still behind them, and he was not falling behind. At first, none of them had truly understood why the old man had allowed Michael to follow. A rank 2, in a situation that involved demon lords and rank 4s. They had assumed it was indulgence. Or perhaps the old man was using him as bait. Or maybe there was some hidden protection they had not sensed. The old man had said the rank 2 could contribute. They had not believed him. Now doubt crept in. The Amazari elder slowed her teleportation again, just enough to confirm what her senses were telling her. Her expression tightened. He was not chasing them blindly. He was even following the residual traces of spatial movement. Crude, inefficient, but accurate, and terrifying. She had seen rank 3 struggle to maintain flight at this speed. Michael was doing none of that. Another sonic boom cracked behind them. The Stonekin elders exchanged a glance. Stonekin valued mass and endurance above speed. Their race did not excel at rapid movement, yet even they knew what they were. Witnessing defied common sense. A rank 2 body should have torn itself apart under that strain. What sort of monster was this? The second Stonekin felt confused. If he had not seen the rank 2's aura with his own senses, he would have assumed this was a hidden rank 3 suppressing himself. No, even that explanation felt weak. The Amazari elder felt a chill trace down her spine. This was her first time witnessing Michael act without restraint. The realization unsettled her. A rank 2 with a body capable of chasing spatial travelers through brute force. She thought back to the old man's calm certainty earlier. This is enough. For the first time, she understood what he might have meant. Behind them, the pressure surged again. Michael pushed harder. The shockwaves grew tighter, more focused. Instead of scattering outward, they wrapped around him, compressed into a moving sheath that reduced resistance through sheer dominance. He felt it too. The strain no longer felt foreign. His body adapted frighteningly fast. His mana circulation stabilized under extreme output, not flaring wildly like most would. His bones stopped screaming. His muscles stopped protesting. They obeyed. Michael's eyes sharpened. He was closer now. Not close enough to catch up to the ones ahead of him, but close enough that the gap no longer mocked him. The realization made his heart beat faster from excitement. In any case, though what happened now seemed to have taken minutes, it was only a few seconds, and soon they caught up with the old man. But none of them had the attention to spare for him anymore. Not when the sky ahead looked like it had been split open. The moment Michael's senses brushed past the space ahead, his mind went still. Hundreds of demons filled the air. It was madness. And fighting them were 3 different forces, 3 different races, scattered across the airspace like islands trying not to be swallowed by a tide. One group fought with elegant formations. Elves. Even from a distance, their style was unmistakable. But they were losing. Not because they were weak, but because the demons were too many. Demons dove like arrows, screaming as they tore through defenses, dragging fighters out of formation. Explosions rippled across the sky, but for every demon that fell, 2 more took its place. The air itself felt poisoned with intent. Michael's breath caught. So this was the eruption. Ahead, the old man stood in the air. And then Michael slammed into the edge of the battlefield's pressure zone, slowing just enough not to crash into them. The sonic boom behind him rolled across the sky like a war drum. For a fraction of a second, the others stared at him again, as if remembering he existed. Their eyes flicked over his posture. Then their attention snapped back to the demons because the sight in front of them did not allow distraction.